Hello, everyone. My name's Julian, and I'm going to talk about turning humans into developers in a post-COVID world. I work for a company that makes HR software in London, but I am German, and I've always been interested in training people. So my current role is to lead a team of junior developers, where we started with basically no junior people in the team, and I've built up a process to make more developers. And I'm going to talk about how to do that when we are remote first in a world where we used to go to the office and now we don't. Yesterday, Alex spoke about training sessions. That was great. I enjoyed that talk. My talk is not about going somewhere and delivering a training. My talk is about this whole process of we're going to have people in-house that we build up to be full members of our teams. It's also not about remote work, but more like dealing with training when you are not physically in the office most of the time. I have done most of this talk in the past in different versions. There are at least 3 different individual talks around that make up parts of this, but I thought for the slightly different audience here, I would do like a full walkthrough. So if you've seen part of this before, maybe there is a little bit of a different spin on how to do it remotely. And if you want to drill down in some of what I say, there's going to be a link to my website, which has all of the talks I've given in the past as recordings, so you can look at the individual bits. Please hold questions until the end. I hope there is nothing unclear, so I won't have to expand. But I hope we can have a discussion at the end. I do like to waffle, so we'll see how far we get. So first of all, quick show of hands. Who of you is a developer? Just leave your hand up. Great, okay, that's almost everyone apart from Koroba, who's reading his laptop. It's fine. Raise your hand. You're a developer. Thank you. And who of you has trained as a developer? So did you go through formal training to become a developer? Interesting. There's 2, but one of them isn't a developer now. Okay, so formal training can be lots of different things. In some cases, it means university, but as I said, I've come from Germany, where there is an apprenticeship which lasts 3 years, and you usually go and find the company, and they hire you, and then you work for them, and they pay you, and at the same time, you go to a vocational school. People who do this have usually not got much prior tech knowledge. They're just smart enough to do a tech job, but many of them have done some programming in the past, but also many haven't. It usually means companies will decide what kind of tech you learn. In my case, my CV said, well, I've done some PHP. I'm sorry. And the guy who interviewed me said, we do Perl here. It's not that we don't like PHP or something. It's just that Perl was around. So that's how I ended up in Perl. As far as I understand, in Finland, there are apprenticeships, but there doesn't seem to be an apprenticeship track for tech that I have found. So it seems like it's more common to either go to university and then get actively recruited, is what I've been told, that there are enough companies that they actually go after people, which is nice, or that you just get hired on merit because you know your stuff even if you haven't gone to university, which is great. The UK does not have much faith in people who haven't paid to go to university, so that's very different. What I'll be talking about, though, is whether you should train your own developers, regardless of where you are. So again, the UK has a slightly different system where it's more about university. But in university, you often don't learn how to be a developer. You learn how to be a student at university and know some stuff about computer science, which is not the same. So I will be talking about how to make developers. And I can't tell you if you should train your own developers, but what I will tell you is whether it makes sense to do so. So why would you train? In the past, I would have said, our office is in Wimbledon. That's not in central London. It takes 45 minutes to get there from the center. If you're on the other side of town, that's like a 1.5-hour commute each way. That's not fun. Of course, now we mostly work from home, so that doesn't apply anymore. So there's other reasons. For example, you can't find developers because there aren't any, because the Perl developer breed is slowly dying out, unfortunately. We're all sadly getting older. So it's tricky to hire them. People don't want to change their languages. It seems like it's unappealing, although your location might be unappealing if you still go to the physical office. But if you make your own, there are lots of people who want to be developers. There are many of them, and many of them aren't exactly picky because there are many more people than there are jobs. So I'm not saying you can trick them into learning Perl, but I'm saying you can pick people up who haven't got enough experience yet to decide what they want to do, and they are grateful for getting good training. So if you deliver good training, you get loyal employees. And also, yeah, you can't be picky. That's the problem. If there aren't enough developer positions, then how can you be picky? So what level should we hire on? In a typical apprenticeship system, you would go for like straight out of school, A levels, high school, Abitur, Matura, whatever that's called. But these people are usually a little bit less mature. So if you can hire graduates of some kind of STEM subject, so anything that's like math or engineering or software related is great. Bootcamp graduates are a thing. They're becoming much more popular, where people pay to do a 3-month intensive class on software development, and then they come out knowing how to use Git more or less, and having seen an IDE before, and with some level of confidence, and sadly sometimes also some form of entitlement, because I've paid £10,000 for this class, I surely have to get a job now. But there's still people you still have to check whether they're actually good at what they think they're doing. Right. The other option, of course, is hiring junior developers who've already done a different language. They might have 1 or 2 years of experience, but there are downsides to this because they might like this other language, like Node.js or Python or Java, that they've done in their previous lives, and there are lots of jobs for those. Why should they come and learn yet another language where they go from being reasonable to being a complete beginner again? And that often doesn't work out. So I tend to stay away from them. And of course, another option is career changers who, say, for example, have done something completely unrelated to tech, like being a teacher or being a chef or being anything that doesn't have computers in it. And they want to get into tech, and then they're really grateful to get trained properly. So I think go for someone who has less previous experience, because that way you can shape them more. What you need to do in order to build your own people development program is very clear interview processes at first. So by process, I mean you should know who is going to do what questions am I going to ask, how many people do I want to hire, how much time do I want to invest to hire them, and how much time am I going to invest afterwards into them. What kind of requirements do I have? If we can't find exactly what we want, are we going to keep looking? Are we going to lower the bar and take what we can find? How urgent is this for us? Exact specifications of what the role is going to be, so you can tell people this is what you will expect, or this is what you can expect. You need to be clear on your work contracts, how this is going to work. You need to talk to your people team and your whoever decides what salaries are. You need to have a budget for their salary as well as the cost of hiring, because that is your time and your people team's time, and time is money in companies. So you can't do something else while you spend 2 or 3 weeks hiring someone. And as I said, it's the most important thing I think to answer is whether you want someone right now or you want them when you find the right one. So how urgent is this? Answer all of this up front, and then the whole process will be fairly straightforward. Then you need to set expectations. There are, in my opinion, 3 different groups that you need to set expectations for. There is your team, so the other developers. They need to come with an open mind, with patience, and with a willingness to explain, because they might not be used to having people who don't know all the answers yet, and they might find it's hard work to having to explain the basics. But that's how we learn. So they need to be on board with doing that. Your management needs to be aware that, yes, someone needs to invest time into training them. That might be you, that might be someone else. You might have a group effort, but the time you spend training this person up is going to be time you're not banging out tickets. So like your management needs to be aware there is an investment up front, and then there's going to be a greater return of investment. But it takes time. And your stakeholders, which are usually the people that want the software that you make, they need to be on board with the fact that probably they're going to have to explain a lot more, like more business logic, more stuff. People are going to have lots of questions. They're going to not understand immediately. But they usually love this kind of thing because it means they get all of the low priority features that your expensive developers don't have the time to do. So all the stuff that kind of like dies a slow death at the bottom of the backlog suddenly gets done because it's the kind of small features that your new developer, like junior developer team can deliver, and that's great. So let's talk about hiring at entry level. First of all, you need to source candidates. So I said I work in a company that makes HR software. So like our product is an ATS, an applicant tracking system. So forgive me for using the HR lingo of how to hire. So sourcing candidates means where did you get people from that apply to you? Well, it used to be that you had to do all kinds of stuff. When I got my qualification for being a trainer in Germany, they taught us about, sourcing them from local advertising. You can make postcards that you can put into restaurants and then they can take them for free, and it's like has funny notes on them. Or you can have advertising in the local tram. Forget all of that. You don't need it anymore. There is a whole internet full of people who want to be software developers. You put your job on your website. LinkedIn and Indeed will go and scrape them. So you don't necessarily even need to pay for those. You can, but if you want to rank higher. But honestly, you probably don't need to. They'll just scrape them and people will run your door in. The last time I've advertised a role, a couple of months ago, we had to close it after a week because we had 200 applications and I had to screen all of them. So I was like, right, that's enough. 200 is more than enough. I'm just going to stop. And if they're all not very high quality, I just open it up again and get another 100 or 200. So you don't need to spend a lot of money to get quality candidates at this point, but you need to spend a lot of time to weed through the ones to find the quality ones. Then next, there is interviewing. There is, in my opinion, a good approach is to do at least 2 rounds of interviews. What I usually do first, before the things here on the slides, is I let the people team do a phone screen. So I screen all of the applicants by reading their CVs, looking at their GitHub, if they have one. I ask specifically, do you have a GitHub account? What's the link? Do you have a Stack Overflow account? What's the link? So I can look at what kind of stuff they've already done. I look at their Git history, if they have GitHub. Is it like, here's my university project, bulk upload with drag and drop? Or is it lots of nice commits? That tells me a lot about what they already know, how they work, and how they think. And if they have Stack Overflow or some mailing lists or something, I can see how eloquent they are, how good they are at talking about tech and talking to others. And then at some point, I have enough of them to say, right, let's talk to them. So I ask my people team to do a basic phone screen, 20-minute phone conversation, to see if they can hold a basic conversation and to see if their CV is aligns with what they're talking about. And then we usually have like a couple of them left, 5, 6. We go into a classic interview, which is now remote. So it's just a video call. That's usually an hour long. There's someone from the people team there, which I think creates a good dynamic of, tech person, non-tech person. We ask typical generic interview questions, like, can you tell us about a time where you were unhappy with your work and what did you do? Or where you had a conflict with someone else and how did you resolve it? And then we do some technical questions, which are very generic, because you can't expect them to know Perl, you can't expect them to know any specific technology. Some of them might have come from computer science degree, maybe a physics degree, maybe a math degree, maybe they've done a bootcamp. So you never know. What I like is open questions such as, here is a table that looks like an Excel table. It has songs, it's an unnormalized database. Imagine we are, insert large streaming provider here. Do you think this makes sense? And if we wanted to search for a song, would that be efficient? And then just have a conversation about it, and maybe they will come up with, this should be normalized, it should be 3 tables, that kind of thing, so that you can have this conversation to see if they don't know it, that's fine, but can you get them to work it out? Can you build rapport and can you get along with them? Because that's going to be your job later on with them. If that doesn't work, they're not the right candidate. And at that point, maybe 2 or 3 stick out. So you invite them again, and then I like a technical challenge where I used to invite them to the office for a whole trial day, give them a desk. That doesn't work anymore. While we still have an office, I could go there and do that. It would be a bit weird if there's no one else there, because our tech team just doesn't go there anymore. We only go there when there's budget for the pub. It means I don't get a free lunch out of it anymore. That's a bit of a shame. It was always nice taking them to the steakhouse for lunch. Take some of the existing people in the team along, see how that works. Yeah, from home we don't do that. So instead, I've taken the project and I've ported it so I can easily recreate it. What I've got is a very small code base that looks like a tiny mini application form for the job that they're applying to, incidentally, the first instance of that job. It's just a one-page form, and there are a couple of tickets. It's in GitLab. I restore a repository, including all of its old commits, all of its ticket numbers, and I ask them to come with a GitLab account prepared. I give them access. I give them a virtual machine that we host somewhere in the cloud that they can SSH into, or they can use VS Code to go into. I'll explain about VS Code a bit later. And then I watch them code for 3 hours, and I talk them through things. And it's like super simple tickets, like here's the application form. There's a bug report. It says zip code, but we're in the UK. People don't know what that is. It should say postcode. And then I watch them try to find the right template file and change one word. And that is really insightful, because if they've done a bootcamp before, they're going to know VS Code. They're going to do Control-Shift-F. They're going to type zip. They're going to be right. It's this file. I'll change this word. I'll restart my thing. It's done. And if they've done a master's in computer science, they'll probably open every file and look by hand. I'm not kidding. So yeah, this is really nice. And then the tickets get gradually a little bit more challenging, up to the point where they have to write a couple of lines of Perl code in an existing file. That's like a little dancer project where they can basically copy and paste one block of if, figure out how do I do Boolean logic, and how do I do like a negated match. And so all of that is easily findable by reading documentation and Googling a bit, and that's not like write new code. It's not very hard, but it exposes them to Perl a little bit, to template toolkit. There's some HTML and CSS things. There are some things that are not visible in the ticket, but maybe there's a bug, and then they find this extra bug. There's extra credit. I've got a whole document that explains every single answer to every problem and how, like what I expect to test there. I've got another talk where I explain this in great detail. If you're interested, you can look at that. What I gain from this is to see how well I work with them. And for them, and that's the really important bit, they see what it's like to work with us, and they see what it's like to be a developer. And I've had people be really good at this, and then afterwards say, thank you, this is so much better than doing homework. I actually didn't enjoy this. I can't imagine myself doing this job for 8 hours every day. I'm going to go and try something else. Like, thank you so much for not wasting my time. And then they drop out, and I'm a bit sad, but I'm also happy that they didn't realize this 3 months in, and then I have to start over. So it's very, very useful. Yeah, so if you want to learn more, find my other talk where I explain the whole thing in detail. So now we've hired someone, we have to onboard them. Starting remotely is very hard. Some of you may have done this during the more severe part of the pandemic. But it's the new normal. We have to do it. So I've hired 2 people during the UK lockdown when we were like not allowed to leave the house, or in various phases of that time. And then I've hired 2 more since we've been back to normal, which means go to the office every 6 weeks when there is a budget for the pub. But we've also hired some people who are not even in London, so they're somewhere in the UK, and it's a bit more tricky for them to come to the office. So at this point, I've met all of them. Yeah, you can't expect to immediately know how tall they are, because you're probably not going to see them in real life for a while. So when they're new, you have to make them feel really welcome, and make sure that they feel connected right away. So try and meet them if you can, but include them in stuff. Kind of force them to go to meetings, force them to go to a couple of invite them to go to a couple of meetings that are maybe not relevant every time for them, but it gets them a chance to be introduced to people. And of course, it's really useful that now every time someone speaks in a meeting, their name is right there. So You can learn people's names and voices, even if you can't learn their faces. And you want to give them support. So you talk to them all of the time. You check in with them regularly. Maybe some companies do this. You could assign a buddy, like you're new, this person is your designated friend now. If you have questions, you can talk to them and they're going to hold your hand and check in regularly. And I think that works really well. I kind of see myself as that person for all the people in my team, because most of them are career starters. They've not worked anywhere else before. So I try to be that person for them if I can. But I also, when we hired senior people who I already know, I try to tend to include them in all of the stuff I do for the junior team, like a daily stand-up, which I'll talk about in a bit, just because our senior team doesn't do that kind of stuff. They all just hack for themselves, and they only meet every 2 weeks. So it gives them a sense of being connected. Supporting them is really important. Yeah, try and build some kind of bond, either with them directly or between your existing people and the new people. So now we've hired someone. Now we have to talk about training and mentoring, and that's two different things. We'll find out how. So another question for you. Think back to your very first day at your first tech job. Just take a moment and imagine what that was like. What did you do? I don't want you to answer it. I just want you to think about it. And then tell me, at that time when you went home, were you looking forward to the next day? I was. I came straight out of university, which I'd quit because I hated it, because I was rubbish at it. And I had, at that point, I was feeling like I was a total failure and I couldn't do anything. And I just basically gone to be nocturnal and play World of Warcraft for weeks. So I'd asked the company that hired me, can I please start like 4 months early instead of when the apprenticeship starts in August? I have time now, can I just do an internship before or something? You don't have to pay me. They did pay me. And I was there 4 months early, and then my very first day, I was given a computer, this desk, I had like one other person in this room, it was great. And then someone gave me a task to, here's a competitor website, find all the prices and the products and return a list, write a function. So of course I passed HTML with regex, as you do when you start. And the next morning, the guy put it into production. And suddenly I'd gone from basically achieving nothing in university to I've rolled out a thing, and this multi-million euro company is now using this code I just wrote, and that was brilliant. So I always strive to make the first couple of days, especially, an experience where they want to come back. And then incidentally, a few months later, I then finally went to school, to the vocational school, and the guy who sat next to me, I asked him, what do you do at work? And he said, well, so I work in this agency and they sometimes allow me to write websites. And at that point, I was talking to other companies and building APIs. Yeah, that's the difference in how much you invest. But now we are remote. So lots of people don't go to the office anymore, which of course means your hiring pool is much bigger, as we already have talked about. But you are, as a new person that just starts out, you are lonely. You're at home, you're maybe, and we'll get to this in a bit, but you're maybe still living with your parents, you're in a room, and suddenly you work from the same room that you sleep in, and that's really hard. So it's lonely, and you can't bond with new coworkers. So it's not as great as it sounds, not having to commute. Maybe in London it is quite good not to have to commute. However, I think in a town like Helsinki, where maybe your commute is a 10-minute bicycle ride, or 15-minute bicycle ride, or one of those wonderful trams or undergrounds that seem to run all the time, then that's pretty cool to go to the office. But you're at home because your company is remote. Maybe your company doesn't have an office. Maybe they've gone to sometimes going to a co-working space. So yeah, you have to deal with these things, and that's part of your job. So that takes us to mentoring. Mentoring is not just about work. There is a lot more stuff that comes with it. This is a slide from my very first version of a talk like this. your role as a mentor is a lot of roles. You wear a lot of hats. You're a teacher, I'm just going to read it out. You're a manager, you're a boss, you're a role model, you're a motivator, a parent sometimes, because usually people who start out in their career are often quite young. And you're their friend. It's important to also be their friend. So just quickly, teacher, obviously you teach them all the things they need to learn. You're the manager, you're the one who approves their holiday, you're the one who says you have to work on this, you have to work on that. I think the boss hat is if stuff doesn't go so well, and sometimes you need to, point them in the right direction. Hopefully not very often. The role model bit is what's really hard remotely. As in the office, you just do the work and they watch you do the work, and observing is a really good way of learning. Remotely, you have to be very verbose about stuff, and we'll get to that. Motivating people is really important. And then, as I said, when they're quite young, they don't have much life experience. They don't know much about being professional yet. Maybe it's the first time in a virtual office. And getting along with them is really important. So you build rapport. You try to be friends with your coworkers. Why not be friends with the ones that are slightly younger than you are? How do you do that from home? So you want to talk to people regularly. You use things like your chat. You have meetings, obviously. If they have questions, you have to have lots of time. You have to be available. I think if you get a question and you're not doing something, you're interruptible, don't bother with chat. Just send them a video invite in whichever way that works. In your tooling, we use G Suite, so I have to say send the video link, and then they click it, and we both join it. And that works really well. Always encourage questions. Always respond. If you're in a meeting, respond with, "Hey, I'm sorry, I'm in a meeting. I'll get back to you." And if they've sent you a question, which of course is better than saying, "Hey, do you have time?" So I encourage them to ask the questions directly. No hello. You can quickly glance at the question and say, "Right, go and ask this question. This person. I'm busy, but this person knows the answer," so that they don't have to sit around and feel like they're being a nuisance. Of course, you have to help them help themselves. So often they don't message. Sometimes, well, I try to do this at least once a day. Like during the day, I just message everyone in my team. Go like, "Hey, how's it going? What are you doing? Do you need anything? Are you all right?" Offer help, or just, you want to show me what you're working on, which is easier if you just wander around the office. You get up to get a cup of tea, you can just stand behind them and have a little look and go like, "There's a semicolon missing, that's why it's not compiling," and then wander off again. That is gone. You're at home, you can't see their screens, not legally anyway. So you have to ask for it. And you also have to be much more patient than you used to have to be. You now have to wait for them to respond. You have fewer tools available to point at the screen or to explain stuff. Just, let's get a piece of paper or whiteboard is much harder now. So I bought a graphic tablet, a cheap graphic tablet that I can draw diagrams with in whiteboarding software. That's really, really useful. My handwriting still hasn't improved, but at least I can make arrows with a pen. So brilliant. But you have to be patient because stuff is harder to understand. You need to learn the right language to describe things on the screen if you're not sat in front of the same screen. And you can be frustrated. And it's okay. It's okay to be frustrated with that. But luckily, you're on the other side of the screen, so they can't see you be frustrated. If you're biting your fist, you're still nice. You're still friendly. Maybe your camera is off, so you can, punch the wall if you have to. But you don't. Oh, there's a question. Yes. You go get your microphone. I will stop.
I can recommend not punching walls. There are 3 modes. I've encountered 2. If it's solid, it really hurts for weeks. If it's studding and you get lucky, you make a hole in it. And if you're very lucky, you don't get in trouble for that. And the one I haven't fortunately encountered is if it's studding with the actual hitting the metal studs, I think you go to hospital.
Thank you.
Do not advise punching walls.
Thank you, Nicholas, for sharing your life experience. This is great. See, that's the thing you're missing out on. If you're not in the office, you can't observe your coworkers doing stupid shit and then not do it yourself. So that's a downside of working from home. Thank you, Nicholas. Yeah, so you have to be patient. If someone doesn't understand something, explain it again in a different way. Saying the same thing louder and slower doesn't help. You have to find a different way to explain it. If that doesn't work, you draw it. And if that doesn't work, you make it into smaller steps. And eventually they'll get it, and that's okay. But if you just show them how to do it, let me just quickly do it for you, that is not going to work. I mean, it's going to work, but they're not going to learn anything, and they'll just rely on you solving their problems, and that's counterproductive. And lastly, you have to be interested in the person, not just in the work. I always like sharing stuff. You may have noticed. Sometimes I go on little explaining sprees. So if we talk about stuff like, I've bought this new gadget. They're telling me something they've bought, and then I end up explaining how USB cables work or the USB bus, because I had to learn that in school, and the UK doesn't have this kind of vocational school. So I'm like, yay, let's talk about different USB standards and things, or about how hard drives work, or hard drives used to work back when they were proper hard drives, or the OSI model, or stuff like that. And I tried to get all of this knowledge that I had to get, and I occasionally find useful. I try to get that in whenever I can, even though they don't have to learn it, but at some point it'll be useful. So I try to do it, which is mentoring. Now let's move on to training from home. You don't just help them, you need to have a plan. I'd like to look at how to have a plan and how to execute the plan. You obviously also have to stay connected. So let's see how. I'd start with staying connected. So we'll do the execution first, the simple bits. So I do daily stand-ups with my whole team. We used to not do these when we went to the office, because there were lots of us, we didn't have a space to do it, and the larger technical team didn't care about it. Everyone worked on their own stuff. So there wasn't really a benefit to people knowing what the others would work on. But if you're all remote, and lots of you are fairly new, and have no clue what anything is, then doing a 10-minute meeting where you have like some kind of reports, your ticket system, whether it's Jira or something else. In my case, it's Track, which I had a lovely conversation about yesterday about how old that is, but we actually can make it work. So I share my screen, I show the board, and we talk about what everyone is working on. And sometimes other people, speak up and go like, oh, I've had that same problem, I know how to solve this. And you have to cultivate that culture. And then they start talking to each other. And I hope they're watching the talk right now. I think we've probably, at the end of the talk, the stand-up starts. So see how many questions we have. If you have to skip out of the presentation, you have to go do your stand-up. You're allowed to, have to stand up later today. Yeah, so I think this is really useful. And every time we hire a new senior person, I offer them to join the trainee stand-up for a bit, which not only makes them feel more connected, it only gets them to know a couple of people. And naturally, new people usually bond with new people. That works in the office, that works remotely as well. But it gives the trainees an opportunity to observe someone really experienced talking about their work. And that is a thing that they can't do anymore day to day, because there's no one there to talk about anything. So yeah, daily stand-up, really important. You should do it. Then there's code reviews. So again, you can't stand behind people and just look at how they work. So you have to very deliberately go and do that, in the same way that you do pair programming, which I'll be talking about next. Code reviews is part of our dev process. Every line of code we write has to be reviewed. But our senior developers are not always very keen on doing that, not even for their own, like each other stuff, because they have lots of stuff to do. And I remember I spent quite a lot of time doing code reviews when I joined there, because I enjoyed doing it. But of course, like your trainees aren't going to be qualified to review this massive diff. But equally, it's going to be a bit sad if no one reviews the stuff they've spent a few days working on. And you might not want to have two fairly new people review each other's code, because that's going to go wrong. Or let's say they might both learn something from it, but they might miss stuff. So if you have to do that, you should probably read everything first. That's what I typically do. If there's someone very new, if they've been there less than a year, I usually look at the stuff they've done, but then I'm not the one reviewing it, because I've very likely helped them do it, which means I shouldn't be Like the process sort of excludes me from being the one to say, yes, this is approved. So then I find someone else to review it. We do assign people to do the reviews that are within the scope of our capabilities every morning in the stand-up. So we go through the list of things that need to be reviewed, and I pick people out and volunteer them. Sometimes they volunteer themselves, which is nice. And I also do mob code reviews, which are quite good. So if there's something larger, I would suggest let's all meet, or let's like a couple of us meet, and we go through this, and then either I drive the review and I explain it because it's complicated code, and it's always fun explaining code someone else has written when you see it for the first time to people who don't understand the code. I very much enjoy that. Or I decide, okay, this person has written this code. You're gonna review this, and you're gonna take this newer person with you and explain it to them. And I think they like it. They haven't complained. Maybe I don't see them complaining because we're all remote. I don't know, but I think they like it. So yeah, code reviews, important. And then pair programming, which is also very important. It's your most powerful tool. It's much easier to point out stuff is missing if you can see what they're doing than if you just get pastes in chat. So I try to meet everyone twice a week for a scheduled 1-hour pair programming slot, which is of course very different to just wandering over in the office. We have fixed times because that means they can be prepared. Sometimes we just work on whatever ticket they just work on. Sometimes I just jump on the call with them and they do their thing and I do my thing, and occasionally there's a question, and otherwise we just have a conversation where we both do other work. For someone more experienced, that works really well. Maybe they bring a specific problem and say, right, I got stuck here, let's just look at that. Or I've done most of this ticket, can you sanity check what I've done? And that's really nice. But sometimes we even skip it because they're like, right, I'm just doing this really mundane thing. Have the meeting back. Let's both have the time back. What I do usually is I use VS Code. Most of our developers now use VS Code. Some still use Vim and Emacs. They're very well configured. They're very good at using them, and that's fine. I try to teach my new developers a little bit of Vim just so that they can write commit messages and stuff without using a GUI. But VS Code, it has a plugin called LiveShare, which basically turns your entire project into a massive Google Doc where you can work on the same files, plural, with multiple people at the same time. And that is so incredibly powerful. If I don't have to read out line numbers all the time, if I say, oh yeah, like on line 917, if you do this, I can just select it and they can see where I've selected and highlight it. It's tempting to, just change something, but you shouldn't do that because you never take the keyboard. Really important. Alex said that yesterday as well. So don't get tempted, but use it in a good way. And then, of course, you share your screen because there's a browser, there's a terminal, there's some other stuff, maybe a database connection or something. So you can talk about stuff. I found when we first went remote, there was a feeling of that I'm trying to surveil them, that this is like I'm checking in on them. Are they really doing work? So we talked a lot about that. That's not the case. But for newer people, that expectation isn't even there. We've done the interview in the same way, so it makes sense, and they've already seen that this is a useful tool, so they look forward to it. And it's really funny when sometimes I jump in with someone and they have a problem, and they talk at me for 2 minutes about the problem, and I say, you're not sharing your screen? You forgot to share your screen. Oh. Okay. And yeah, it's so normal now to do this. It's the most powerful tool you have. Yeah, but you can also encourage people to pair up. When I go on holiday or I go to a conference, I usually try and say, while I'm away, you two, can you use your pair programming sessions to just work together? And that works really well as well. But don't overdo it. You're going to have a lot of calls. My diary used to be completely empty when I was in the office. Someone wanted something from me, I would just be like, yeah, you work in a customer-facing role. You have the meetings. You tell me when you have time. I'll be here. No, doesn't work anymore. My diary is very full now, and you should know when to take breaks. So don't do meetings back to back. Leave a few minutes time to go to the bathroom, to have a new cup of tea, to have a snack. Schedule your lunch break as a thing so that people can't put meetings in them. But I digress. I didn't want to talk about remote working in general, but you have to be an example so you don't, force people to work through lunch, for example. Also, tell them in advance when there's going to be a meeting, so that you don't, step into my office right now. You in here, we talk. That's really terrible. Don't do that. It gives them massive anxiety. They think they're in trouble. It's like schedule all the meetings up front, and then that is much easier. I also tend to not force people to turn the camera on. I often don't turn my camera on myself because I might wear a towel on my head or something. Comes with the long hair. But for performance review meetings or for the one-on-ones, I usually turn it on. That depends how dressed I am. And that's okay. Not everyone has a good day every day. If you don't have the energy, just leave the camera off. It's fine. It doesn't matter. We know we're there. I can hear you speak. I don't have to see you. So good. Let's go on to leading. The best way of leading is leading by doing. For remote work, that is especially true. But it's tricky if you're not in the same room. So motivation is key. But it's very hard if you can't see people. And people like being seen. They like to be appreciated. And they like to know that their work matters. So you have to make them feel like their work matters. Try to make sure that they know that what they do is part of the company being successful. You have to celebrate them. And you have to keep them engaged. So especially over long periods of time when you're at home and you don't really talk to many people, check in with them, speak to them regularly, maybe not just once a week. So I think that's why it's important to, whenever you actually help them with something, just check in as well and have the conversation, use the words to do it. And also, try to get feedback. Do you like the ticket you're working on? Is this really terrible? Shall we just, put it on hold, do something that's more fun first, and then come back to it, and maybe then you'll have a better idea of how to deal with it. Or do you want to do something very specific? Tell me. It's fine. You can tell me. If you're really frustrated, just tell me about it. Like, I'm not going to be angry at you for not liking what I make you do. Let's work this out together, and build a relationship. Build a personal relationship so that you know what's going on in their lives, so you can emphasize. If you don't know why they're sad, you can't help them not be sad and therefore be better at what they're doing. How do you keep track of this? I've already said the diary is your friend, but you should also have notes. Put all the meetings in up front, schedule them as recurring things so they always know this is my slot, that I can be prepared, and then take notes. Write down what they're saying, especially when you talk to them in private, somewhere where no one else can read it so you can refer back to it. If you've got lots of reports, it's very tricky to keep track of whose personal things are in what order, or who's going to travel when. And so I just write it down. It's much easier. And then I do as I said, the weekly catch-up meetings, but I also do monthly progression meetings, and that's going to be the next section when we talk about these performance review style meetings. And in those, if you have the notes, you can always go and say, like, right, you're always tired, you don't perform well. Let's find out why that is. And I can't help you go to sleep, but I can help you not have to get up super early in the morning and be there. If you can't do the stand-up, okay, just write a chat message what you're working on, and then you come in at lunch. Well, you turn your computer on at lunch, and then you work till 8. And like, if that helps you deal with the situation, maybe your partner's abroad in 10 hours ahead, and you want to talk to them, I don't care when you do the work, as long as there's enough overlap for us to interact and do our jobs. I'm totally fine with this. And that's one of the real benefits of working from home. In the office, that's more tricky. You have to explain much more. In this situation, I can just, in the stand-up, say, this person is going to come in later because they had a late night and they're going to work later today. Or they might have just told everyone. It depends what kind of situation it is. But yeah, write these things down so you remember them. But let's talk about developing people. I think part of our jobs when we're training is to not just make them into into like a developer that fits, like a code monkey that fits your company. No, I like to give them outlooks and career paths. I want to teach them software development to really be like prepared for their entire careers. And you have to set goals, even if goals sometimes don't work in software development. So let's look at alternatives. But first of all, when you are really new, you've got lots of questions. Like, this is true for most jobs. What is expected of me? How do I know if I'm good at my job? How do I even do this? Are they going to judge me really hard? Like, I might not be able to do this at all. Or I might think so. How long is this going to take? When will I be good at my job? Is this going to get really hard? I'm bored. Can I get harder things now? Why should I even stay here? There's so many questions. They're all there in the beginning, and you have to answer them. Not just for trainees, but for everyone. So we will answer them. And of course, there are all of these challenges. The beginning of the career in particular, not just a new job is always scary, but when you've never worked in a job before, it's extra scary. And you can't go to the office to see everyone else do it. You're at home in your room next to your bed, which is visible on your camera. So that's a bit rubbish. Luckily, there's blurring. I don't know what's expected of me. It's really hard. I can't compare myself to others because I don't understand. It's not school where there's 20 of us starting at the same time, where it's fairly easy to see how are the others doing, but there are no grades at work. And there are no people that started at the exact same time with the exact same amount of background knowledge. So I don't know how to compare. I don't know how well I'm doing. And for me, like, how do I keep track of who is doing in what way? I can write little stars. Yeah, maybe not. And if you as a company used to only have very experienced people, then how do you even convince them that junior people aren't just not good at their jobs yet? They can be good at their jobs, but their job is different, and you have to scope that. How? Easy. A career progression framework. Lots of big companies have that. I've taking a lot of inspiration from Monzo, the UK bank, who at this point I think haven't got theirs public anymore. They used to have it public, which was great. A progression framework clearly defines skills, roles, what's needed, and how it's measured. And that helps you say, if I want to do the next higher paid role, I need to achieve these things. I need to be able to do these things, and then I will almost automatically, not automatically, but I can say to my manager, look, I know all of these things. I should be in the next tier, and then you usually will be in a large enough company. I use this slightly differently. I use it as a set of stuff that they have to know how to do or have to display as properties, as behaviors, and that works quite well for us. So it doesn't provide a rating system. It's not a hard list of requirements. It is not a checkbox list, but it is very, very useful. There are, in our framework, 5 core characteristics, which I have mostly borrowed from Monzo. Mastery is the domain knowledge and technical capability. Impact is the size, scope, and value of what people deliver. Influence is how that positively impacts the work environment and other people. Communication is how they interact with others, and leadership is how people around them become better and more impactful. These are kind of like the headings of sections of a bullet point list of things they should be able to do. Then there is progression with my lovely graph that grows downwards. This is how qualified you are, and it's really hard not to learn. That's why it grows downwards. Even if you don't feel like you're making much progress right now, you will still learn new things. So gravity sort of makes you better at it. There are 4 levels. Probation period, obviously, in the UK that's 3 months. In Germany, for an apprenticeship, it's 4 months, and for like general jobs, it's up to 6 months. I believe that's an EU standard. I looked it up for Finland. It's also up to 6 months for a normal job. Then there are a trainee developer. Then there are a junior developer, and at some point they leave my team and they get released into the wider tech team, where they're already a member of. Just this extra level of management, I go away, and they just carry on what they're doing. It just gets a little bit more impactful. In the probation period, for us, this is just very basic. You settle in, you learn the basics of coding, you learn your development environment, and you work very closely with me. Often they don't take the full 3 months to go through this list. Then we have the trainee developer. I'm only going to show like a few examples. This is the longest stage. The complexity and size of tickets gradually improves over time in order to build their confidence in both their technical and their communication skills. They'll usually start out working really closely with me, but then it sort of gets more loose, and we go from doing lots of things together to planning things together to leaving the implementation details to them. And yeah, that usually takes about a year to a year and a bit, maybe a year and a half. Then they're a junior developer where they're much more self-reliant and they take ownership. They trust their tech skills and make decisions on their own. They will communicate effectively and confidently. They don't really need my help anymore very often. It's more about making a plan together, and they already help others. I did do a separate talk about this in great detail, which you can find on my website. And once they're done, they leave the trainee team. They're just completely integrated. And everyone in the wider tech team trusts them, which is nice. So you have to earn trust in every team. But I think if you do that gradually, it works really well. But let's now talk about challenges for when you go remote first. I'd just like to share a few things that I have found over the last couple of years, and that I've also asked my team specifically to think about. What do you not like about the remote stuff? And if we have some time, maybe we can have a quick discussion about what you've experienced yourself. So personal challenges, career starters often don't have good home office space. Like most of us will by now be used to working from home, so we often have a dedicated room. Maybe it's in the basement, maybe it's upstairs, maybe there's but you have a room that that has a nice desk. Maybe it's a standing desk, it's massive screens, you have an expensive keyboard, you can close the door, your children and your dog don't come in. But yeah, as I said, you probably, if you're 21 and you've just graduated, you probably live with your parents in your room with your bed, or you live in shared housing in London, which costs an arm and a leg and an arm. And there are other people in the house, and you don't really have quiet, and it's really cramped, and you can't even, put a proper desk in your tiny bedroom because there's just no space. And that's rubbish. So that's a big challenge. Or especially during lockdown, that's a very important one I just want to mention, is that maybe it's not safe to be in the house the whole day, and maybe you need to leave and be somewhere else. That's a situation that can arise, and you have to be aware of that as an employer and as a manager of people. So talk to them about their personal situations and how they can make the work. Of course, it's lonely and disconnected. Everyone's gonna have experienced that at some point. So I think you need to encourage them to make friends with their peers, to at least be social enough that they can talk to them. In the UK, they come to the pub budget event and then they get drunk together, and that's great because they're all the same age. Doesn't work for everyone. There's quite a lot of drinking culture in UK offices. I think there's a drinking culture in Finland too, I've heard. Well, don't encourage the really young ones to get drunk all the time. You can be social and learn each other's quirks and get to know each other better without getting hammered. Then there's communication challenges. So that's a big one. They're afraid to ask questions. Everyone's afraid to ask questions. So think about how to alleviate that. People often think, and this is mind-boggling to me, that if I write you a chat message, I'm going to interrupt you because you're so busy and important. Guys, it's chat. It's asynchronous. I don't have notifications. It's okay. You can send me all the messages. I will read them eventually. And if I'm super busy and I think you're in trouble, I'm going to point you to someone who can help. Of course, that's my job. I'm not going to leave you alone, but don't be worried. I'm not going to feel interrupted, or it's it's harder if you're in the office. I always used to say, if I'm wearing headphones in the office, that's not because I don't want you to interrupt me. It's because the office is loud and I'm listening to music. Just, wave in front of my face or throw something at me. That works. With chat, you have to be really clear and you have to say this over and over. If there is a large technical chat room or something, and it depends on your tools a little bit, questions often get lost. You ask a question and then something important happens, the release is broken or something, and your question just scrolls off the screen and no one answers it. So you would be encouraged to message individual people, but you don't know them very well. So how do you know which one to ask? So you ask the wrong person, and that wastes time for you and for them. and then you've interrupted them again, and then you don't want to interrupt them, and it's all terrible. So you have to really make sure they know who to ask questions to. And then there's the skill challenges. Because you're not near other people, you can't see them fail. So you can't see that in order to write this really complicated big piece of code, it takes many attempts and it's frustrating, and then they go and have 10 cups of coffee, or they punch the wall, or they wear a cardboard box and scream in agony, because sometimes that's what it takes. But you can't see. You just see them submit large patches, and you go like, I'm never going to be this good. You will, but you can't observe them, and that's rubbish. So you can't learn by observing. You can't, look at your neighbor's screen and be like, oh, what's that tool? I've never seen this before. How do you use that? There's lots of computer skills as well, especially for someone who has come into this from a completely different career path. There is things that we would consider basic computer literacy if we've started out as very techie people that developers pick up over time, but you can't if you're the only person using the computer in your house. So how are you going to pick it up? And then in particular, there's the professional environment. So how do I behave in the office? How do I communicate professionally? It's something that you see others do, but you don't. You can see me write full sentences, and I try and put, full stops at the end of sentences, at least when I write an email. But that's probably not enough. So sometimes you have to go and talk to people about this. Yeah, there are lots of challenges. I'd really like to hear more about the kinds of challenges that you've come across. But first of all, thank you very much for listening. And do you have any questions?
Hi. Do you use some tomato technique?
You mean Pomodoro technique?
Yes, Pomodoro. Sorry, yeah, but Pomodoro is Italian word.
It's Italian word, yes. So that the Pomodoro technique means to slice a task into short periods of time, so that you can focus on things. I have suggested this to people. I personally don't use it. I jump from one task to another, and it's very, very hard to keep track sometimes. And I multitask and do 3 things at once, which is terrible. Personally, but it works for me because I seem to be quite good at it. When people are having trouble to concentrate over a long period of time, I suggest this to them, and it has given us various results. Like for some people that works, for others it doesn't. I will usually use this to go and tell them about how sometime towards the end of my own training, I thought I had too many different things on and I was being interrupted too often. So I found this guy on the internet who was a massive geek about being effective. And he had these, like I printed out these forms to color in little bubbles to kind of like time tracking, to say I spent 15 minutes on this, and then there was emails, and then someone came in and asked me questions, and I did this ticket for a bit, and then someone came in and asked me questions. And explaining these things to them with own experiences works really well. But I don't know if I've really seen a really complete example of someone using the Pomodoro technique to be more effective. But again, I can't really check apart from asking them if it worked, because I'm not with them. Okay, you had a question?
Thank you. Not really a question, but I wanted to say that thanks for putting so much emphasis on the availability bit of the manager, or the first point of contact for the new recruit. That is extremely important.
Oh, yeah.
That the manager is available at any point. I've seen so many managers, superiors failing in that, and I've seen a few who otherwise were not that good, but they were better because they always answered the questions, whether it was in chat or telephone or just being there at the office.
Yeah, you have to lead by example, exactly. And I mean, I think most of us have been in a situation where you've shown up to your first day at your new job, and they were like, "Oh, right, it's your first day. Let's. Where are you gonna sit? Oh, we've just fired this person. You can have that desk." Any more questions? I think technically we're at the end of time, but lunch is not going to run away, so I'm just going to boldly run over if you want to. Is there anything else anyone wants to say? Wolf? Microphone? Microphone?
Are you applying e-learning stuff, or are you considering tutoring? Authoring e-learning stuff.
Authoring e-learning stuff is hard. I am using one tool. One of my dear colleagues, Andrew Solomon, is running a company called GeekUni, which is an e-learning platform for Perl. Specifically, it's a paid course. It's not cheap, but it's very high quality for Perl Basics. So I use that along with an O'Reilly subscription for unlimited books that we give to people to get them up to speed with Perl, and I try to go and have sort of like the first couple of weeks spend half a day learning and half a day working. And yeah, that's a mix of usually the Learning Perl book and GeekUni, and that works well for us.
Unfortunately,
Great.
we do have to next.
We do have to stop so Salva
Yes.
can talk about security things, I believe.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. I hope this was useful.